County. I'm Denny Zane, founder of Move LA, original executive director. I see I have with me our current executive director, Eli Lippman. Show your face, Eli. There you are. As well as Marissa Garcia and where's Monica? Monica Ballast. All right. So we have several staff members here. We also have with us team members from LA SkyRail Express. Those of you who were with us day before yesterday know that we had a similar program about the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, the subway alternative for this system. And today we're going to be looking at the proposed monorail system. Some of you may be familiar with monorail in the Inky Dinky version that went around Disneyland for a while. I think the technology is probably a much more mature technology than that. We're going to hear from advocates here, these proponents, about that, I'm sure, as well as everything else about their proposal. We've given everybody encouragement that we want to hear the best case, why they think their option is the best option for the Sepulveda Pass from the San Fernando Valley over or under the hill to the west side, potentially then connecting to the Purple Line subway, as well as the Exposition Light Rail line, all of which are getting new letter names that I haven't completely learned yet, but I love the Purple Line. I love the colors, right? Ride the rainbow. So let's start then with Mark Ware, I think is the first person from the SkyRail Express team. Mark, introduce yourself.
Excellent. Well, first off, thank you so much, Denny and Eli, for having us and providing the forum for us to present to you all. So I'm Mark Wire. I lead stakeholder outreach for the SkyRail project. I've been working in transit for nearly 20 years in Southern California. I worked at MetroLink. I was the director of communications for the People Mover project at LAX. But I'm particularly excited to be with you all today and the SkyRail executive team to kick off this presentation for this critical mass transit project for our region. So we're currently in an environmental review phase with Metro on this project. So in this phase, we're conducting stakeholder outreach to organizations like yours, neighborhood councils, and other stakeholders that have an interest in this corridor. And so because we're in this environmental review phase, nothing has been formally approved yet. And so Metro has asked us to begin by sharing a disclaimer. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up this disclaimer for Iman from Metro to go ahead and read. So I'm going to turn it over to Iman.
Thank you, Mark. And good afternoon, everyone. I am Iman Smith here on behalf of Metro. And as Mark mentioned, Metro does require that we read this disclaimer prior to the team providing their presentation. So I'll begin. You see it in front of you. Because Metro has not completed a secret review, the information contained herein does not constitute or evidence an approval by Metro of or a commitment of Metro to any action for which prior environmental review is required under CEQA. That's the California Environmental Quality Act. Metro retains absolute sole discretion to make decisions under CEQA, which discretion includes, without limitation, 1, deciding to proceed with the project, not proceeding with the project, known as a no-build alternative, and 2, deciding to approve the project. There will be no approval or commitment by Metro regarding the development of the project unless and until Metro, as a lead agency and based upon information resulting from the CEQA environmental review process, considers the impacts of the project. And for information regarding the project, you may visit Metro's website, www.metro.net/projects and /Sepulveda corridor. Thank you again for having me. And I will be here in an observational capacity, but I will turn off my camera and mic now. Go ahead, Mark. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Iman.
And I just want to quickly add as well from Move LA side, and I put this in the chat, that we are a 501c3 nonprofit project of community partners dedicated to open and civil dialogue. And one of the things that that has come up, and I just want to disclose, is just that we both of the competing teams have been corporate sponsors for Move LA's conference and organization in the past, and we are hosting these really to provide the community discussion. We're driven by our mission not the money. And we wanna have a great dialogue with both teams about how we get the best project for Los Angeles. So go for it, Mark.
Thanks, Eli. So today we're going to be covering a brief background on the project, monorail capabilities. We're going to present the SkyRail alternatives. We're going to talk about SkyRail and why SkyRail, and we're going to, of course, spend time answering questions. So just to dive right into this, I know a lot of you are very familiar with the background on this project. You know, Move LA was instrumental in getting Measure R and Measure M passed. But this project dates back to 1974. This was envisioned as part of a critical north-south alignment on the western half of Los Angeles, and it was part of that initial map that the transit planners put together. You can see that map in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can see on the right, you know, where we're finally at, you know, here decades later. But it wasn't until Measure M was passed that, you know, that critical funding was applied to this project. You know, this was a signature piece of Measure M, and obviously provides that critical linkage on the western half of Los Angeles, connecting the valley with the west side and eventually to the airport. So in terms of time, I just want to turn it over now to Michael Hogugi, who's our program manager, to kind of walk us through the next slides. So Michael.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. My name is Michael Hogugi. I'm the project lead for LASER, LA SkyRail Express. I'm delighted to announce that and share with you that we have a solid team that both on the financing as well as technology and design, as well as operation that are in our consortium, very much familiar and engaged in many of the transit projects in Los Angeles, in California, and more broader in the rest of the US and some internationally. So I won't read the names individually, but I think you will find these names very familiar based on prior projects. And we also, what's not mentioned here, we have a very healthy, robust cadre of DBEs, disadvantaged business entities, that are critical components of our team. And they've also delivered projects across the globe. And collectively, we have a few thousand years of professional experience in the space, and particularly in monorail technology. Next slide, please. So we're in the environmental process. As Mark said, I'm sure the audience is keenly aware of the CEQA and later the NEPA process that will follow for the environmental clearance. The current stage of the program is in the last phase of the PDA, pre-development agreement, which is phase 3, before the locally preferred alternative is selected. If the question comes up in advance, we don't have a date for the LPA yet. It was originally intended to be in February of 2024, but obviously it has pushed out, and Metro will decide and clarify that at a later date. Next slide, please. Very quickly, since Danny brought up that this is a monorail technology, obviously it's a more modern version of what you've seen in Disney or other implementations across the world. This is really the latest generation of the technology that exists for straddle type monorails. You have suspended monorails and you have straddle monorails. And again, they all have their own peculiarities and advantages. This one that we're proposing for Los Angeles is the modern version of the straddle type monorail, where the skirts wrap around the guideway beams. And again, they provide both aesthetics as well as functional benefits for further noise reduction. Even though we're running on rubber tires on a concrete beam, it just is a better version of what has existed in the past. And by the way, I have an affinity for the Disney monorail. It's been in operation for many decades. To their credit, it's still operating despite all the seismic activities and everything else, which is one of the benefits of the monorail technology. You basically are gripping that guideway beam, so it's very secure under any circumstances. And in a seismic environment like we have in LA, These things have been in operation in Japan, and they are the first ones to go back into resuming the passenger service. Again, there's a protocol for operation. If you have seismic activity, certain things happen. One of them is that you stop the movement and you have to inspect everything before you resume operation. And monorails are typically, again, this is easily fact-checked, within an hour, they're back up and running in their corridors. So the popularity has been growing in the recent decades for two reasons, primarily, in my opinion. One is their affordability, and second is their construction time. And they are able to be inserted to densely developed fabric of the cities that are very much developed and built out. And there is no real dedicated corridor. So the light footprint that they have for their construction enables them to really be inserted into any area with minimal impact, with minimal cost, and maximum quick construction time. You see this in Sao Paulo, you see this in Tokyo, in other places, in China, Cairo. I was just building a line that was almost 70 miles long, two lines. And that was being built. If you've ever seen or been to Cairo, you know that area is developed like spaghetti. There is no rhyme or reason for it. But yet again, we managed to find the opportunity to insert them and make sense. The alignment is in fact constructed right now. So as in any engineering program, regardless of the discipline, you're always driven by certain factors to be optimized and to be integrated into your design. And until money and time go out of style, those two really decide many of the factors. So you design for the maximum affordability and minimum construction time. Otherwise, we have to put our alignment underground like we are doing in the near UCLA. That area, even with our technology and the flexibilities that monorails bring in, we had to resort to putting the alternative 2 connection to UCLA and alternative 3 connection to UCLA underground. We did that very sparingly because tunnel construction is the most expensive component of any transit project. And you create a lot of other sort of not so visual, but you actually suffer the pain points. You know, you have to haul out the muck that you dredge from those tunnels, you clog up the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So again, we had no other option for alternative 3 to put that 3-mile segment of our alignment underground. That gives UCLA a 1-seat ride, and you know, that was the only way to deal with it. Our alternative 1 provides a bus connection that Gerard will talk about. So the intent of all those 3 alternatives was really to give UCLA and Metro some choices in terms of what we're doing. In terms of our service frequency, the system is designed to be driverless, so we could theoretically operate down to 60-second headway. We are, in this project, we don't envisage operating in less than 2 minutes just because the ridership demand. And usually for that grade of GOA 4 systems, which is fully driverless operation, usually people operate that in the peak times at 90 seconds. So we are in the 2 minutes, so we're not too far off from that. If need be, we could be going to 90 seconds. However, the demand isn't there. So the initial configuration based on Metro's requirement for 12,000 passengers per hour per direction, we designed the system to initially start with 6 cars and be able to scale up to 24,080 passengers per hour per direction. So that's an exciting number because that means that in any given hour, you would be moving somewhere around 48,000 passengers. Again, theoretically, if the demand is there. And we're not capacity limited in that sense. So the numbers that we hear in terms of the ridership from one mode to another, that's different. That's a function of the catchment and other factors that the models indicate. the models are only going to be as good as the assumptions that go into it and the preferences that they support, whether it's travel time or something else. So you'll see that minor disparity between the 6 alternatives that Metro has today. That is not, in my opinion, my professional opinion, that's not the end game. Whatever gets chosen, Metro, I'm sure, will do the maximum optimization to maximize the ridership on these networks. The capacity that I talked about, 24,080, comes from the fact that each car in our vehicle can hold approximately 100 passengers with a 2-minute headway. You can kind of figure out where that number comes from, 8 cars. Next slide, please. I'll hand the presentation to my colleague and my trusted design manager, Gerard Kachian here. So he'll walk you through the 3 alternatives that Laser has.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to present today. So today we're talking about out of the 6 alternatives that Metro is evaluating for the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, where our team is developing the first 3 alternatives, alternatives 1, 2, and 3. And you can see on the map there on the left, the general configuration. If Mark, you can help me with the pointer there, from the way the project is structured and the demand, the needs that is there. It's about a 15 to 16 mile transit line that connects from the Van Nuys Metrolink station and the Amtrak there, along the Lausanne corridor, the rail corridor to the 405, and down ultimately the southern terminus is the Expo line. And Metro has stipulated several intermediate connections that must be met as far as the orange line, the purple line, and the Expo line as well. But we've added additional stations along the corridor. And our approach is to fully utilize the existing transit corridor in a multimodal way to use that 405 Sepulveda corridor to be able to connect a transit option that does not require the extensive tunneling that Michael mentioned, but provide that service, provide the demand, or address the demand of the system, and be able to connect. So we've proposed 3 alternatives that we've evaluated in an environmental document that has 8 to 9 stations, depending on the alternative, with different maintenance facilities and so forth. But the unique difference in each one is how we connect to UCLA. As you know, that's an important employment destination, a center destination. I'll get to the details in a second. But generally from the alignment perspective, they're all identical with the exception of how we achieve that connection to UCLA, whether in a 1-seat or 2-seat configuration. So this alternative 1 is, again, the 15-mile alignment along the rail corridor on Raymer Street, if you're familiar with that area, and down the 405 corridor. We take advantage of both the median and to the side of the freeway as we have room and availability, again, looking at reducing impacts as much as possible, reducing impacts to the neighborhoods or properties and the local streets. And really the technology allows that surgical placement of the guideway within the corridor, within an existing corridor. So we can effectively take more than a lane of traffic off the road with the demand that the monorail system can hold, and be able to go in and insert this technology into a highly dense urban environment as well, but provide that ridership and comfort, and also the visual elements that we can traverse the Sepulveda fast in that beautiful corridor there. Specifically on alternative 1, again, it's a 15-mile alignment. In this case, if I can direct your attention to the inset there, it's in this case, this is our base condition. This is the lowest cost option. Without a tunnel through the neighborhoods there, Bel Air neighborhood, where we would connect to the purple line that's under construction right now at that VA hospital, the Wilshire Boulevard. And in this case, we would provide a bus connection to UCLA, to the Luskin Center, their current transit drop-off, I think similar to all the other alternatives. And this would be a dedicated electric bus system that would be timed and developed so that it meets the demand or the ridership and the frequency that the SkyRail trains are arriving at that station as well. So we would provide that service, and we would ramp up or down that service depending on obviously the time of day and the peak demand and so forth. And we're looking at various different options, fully understand that that is a congested corridor, but again, this is our base condition with the lowest cost option as well. The next alternative 2, very similar connection, alignment on the 405 corridor. Again, just to note the stations, there are no stations proposed in the median of the freeway. They're all on the side, whether to the west or east side. And that facilitates not only the driver experience, but also connection to other modes as far as bicycle ped, other transit modes connecting to the G line, the Purple line, the Expo line, but also the local bus network as well. And we want to capture as much of that area and ridership as we can, but also provide that, you know, connectivity, whether people are walking to the station, and all the stations will have park and ride, kiss and ride, and drop offs, Uber, Lyft, other facilities, and be able to access the stations as well. So just going back to the alternative itself, in this configuration, if I can direct you to the inset again, in this case, we veer off the freeway to Veteran and Wilshire Avenue. And in this case, alternative 2, this was an alternative that we extensively studied. And this was going to be an underground automated people mover configuration, very similar to the LAX airport as far as the technology. But in this case, it would be the modern Sky Shuttle technology that you see in the picture on the bottom. However, this is one alternative that we vetted extensively over the last couple of years, and we've looked at probably about 25 different alignments and configurations, above ground, underground. However, based on our evaluation, we've made a recommendation to Metro that this alternative is dropped from further consideration beyond this phase of the environmental process. We just did not feel from a benefit cost perspective, and again, doing a lot of analysis, that this alternative had benefits above and beyond the first and the third alternative. So this is one that we've recommended, and Metro will come up with that information, but we just want to put this in text as well. If this presentation is circulated, that this alternative as a laser, we're recommending to Metro to not advance it beyond this phase, leading into the draft environmental document circulation. And we can answer any questions you have on this alternative as well. The next alternative, alternative 3, is this one again is identical within the 405 freeway, but this has an additional station at the Getty, just like alternative 1 does. So we have an additional station compared to alternatives 4, 5, and 6 that provide that connection to the Getty Center, and Skirball and others, which is a important destination, we feel, for LA as well, and that cultural center. And we'll talk about that in a subsequent slide as well. But in this alternative, what we do is we come down south to the Getty. At that point, we veer to the east in a tunnel configuration. You can see the little graphic there on the bottom. And we go under the Sunset Boulevard to an underground UCLA station. Very similar to the other alternatives, what we serve UCLA in a single seat alternative. And then we would proceed further south, west, and have another underground station below the UCLA Lot 36, if you're familiar with the area. That's the intersection of Veteran Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard. And then we would daylight south of Wilshire Boulevard and back to the freeway alignment, whether in the median or to the side, and with a station at Santa Monica, and also terminate at the Expo station in this, what Metro is considering the phase 1 of the Sepulveda transit corridor. Phase 2 is envisioned as an extension of this line, whether monorail or other heavy rail alternative, to LAX, in our case, a very similar technology that would, or identical technology that would connect to LAX. So we've set up the stations, the sizing, the operations capable to extend this line as Metro determines the timing and the funding that's available to extend this to LAX, to the Conrack facility that's being constructed right now as well, and the automated people mover that goes into the horseshoe of LAX. So the system is designed with far as capacity and ability to extend to LAX if Metro wishes. And we can talk a little about the construction of that a little later. In this case, it's one additional station, a monorail station, and we've got some pictures we can show you what some of these would look like, and then with the additional Getty station. But thank you, Mark. So this is an early artistic rendering of what the underground UCLA station will look like for alternative 3. This is looking southwest. As you can see, there is all the vertical circulation elements. There'll be escalators, stairs, a full ADA compliance, and Metro has a very specific design criteria as far as the Metro stations are concerned. We would use all those elements in the Metro's guidance and standards for them, but we would also look at a user experience that's going to be really unique to LA and maybe even craft the stations very unique to the neighborhoods that it's serving as well in the area. So there's opportunities there for artwork and other elements, and even potentially rooms for destinations for the neighborhoods if they so desire. So these are all under consideration. And like I said, this is an artist rendering of what the UCLA location with a single seat ride would look like. And the next slide, Mark, is this is an artist rendering of the Purple Line station. And then this is looking northeast. This is the intersection of, again, of Wilshire and Veteran Avenue under the UCLA Lot 36. In the gray shading, if I can direct you there, that's the current Purple Line construction that is underway. And what we're proposing is a underground monorail station as well that would have that direct transfer to the Purple Line. So you can connect to the rest of Metro system here, going east or west into as well, and then continue south to the Expo. Again, this is an early artist rendering. When Metro releases the environmental document, there'll be really advanced artistic renderings that's being developed right now, but this is just to give you a context of what a station could look like and how it integrates with the Purple Line as well. Next slide, Mark. This is an early rendering of the Van Nuys Metrolink station, just at the Van Nuys Boulevard. Everybody thinks familiar with the East San Fernando Valley line that's being constructed right now. We've subsequently shifted this station to the west further, to the east, but just really shows how we intend. These are open, they can be either open air stations or enclosed stations, depending on where they're located. So along the 4 or 5, if once the environmental studies are done, any kind of noise or air studies that are done, we can fully enclose, air condition the stations, or we can leave them open. And we love that open experience for LA as well. It's really a different station mindset than traditional underground stations, but we're looking for that modern connectivity, has all the elements of the stations that we need, but also connects to the bus and transit and other pedestrian networks as well that's in those neighborhoods. Next slide, Mark. So this is another rendering of what the typical stations can look like. You can see the elements, vertical circulation elements, from the ground to a mezzanine level, and then to the platform level as well, with all the ADA, bike, ped. We'll have all the bike storage, peds. Just all the similar elements that Metro provides for their stations. The bottom 2 pictures there are artist renderings of what an interior of the station would look like. If I can direct you to the left one, you can see these are like modern open air lighted, probably glass ceiling stations with the natural light coming in, and all the safety elements as far as sliding doors and so forth that would provide the access to the monorail once it's at the station as well. And on the right is the early rendering of what the UCLA underground station can look like as well. So we're looking at all these options. Next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it over to Michael to discuss our connectivity to the Getty.
Thank you, Gerard. My dear friend Gerard and our brilliant design manager covered a lot of the points about the stations. I'd like to add a couple of thoughts that have been our aspiration from the beginning. The architectural renderings that Gerard showed are nothing compared to what we have in mind. Obviously, we cannot show it because of the PDA process. We have, as I said, over-designed, oversized the stations in hopes of creating a sense of community and a lot of community services ultimately that could be possible. Again, the decision is not ours. All we can do is to enable those features or functionalities for Metro to select whichever, and then we will be working with Metro if we are lucky enough to be chosen as the LPA to bring in those innovations. These are not the transit experience that I see with full humility in LA today. We are hoping to transform the passenger experience, not only in terms of how they feel safe and secure, but also giving them that bird's eye view of this beautiful city to really advertise it rather than trying to hide the city from the visitors or travelers alike. So I'll keep tuned into that discussion. Hopefully we'll be able to share more details on the stations soon. But getting back to the Getty station, Getty is a cultural iconic location. We felt very strongly that based on their passengers and visitors and workers, it deserves a station. Beyond that, from an equity perspective, in our opinion, you have to connect, we have to connect to such locations in the cities. This is an international practice that I'm used to. Hopefully that will be selected, and this will be one of our key strengths that we've done. The other alternatives, to my knowledge, don't connect to such locations. Nonetheless, we will keep that in mind, and all our designs from day one wasn't that can we build a transit network for this corridor. I think we were already convinced that we have to find the solutions, and we've done that. The inspirations and the motivations were, how do we make it affordable? How do we make the construction time minimal so the urban insertion challenges are minimized or avoided, because that's a main consideration regardless of where you're building these things. And what is the journey experience that we're trying to create for the passengers? It wasn't about whether it's a technology or something else. This is the technology we felt strongly enough that is suited for LA with all the particularities that it has, and it plays well with the innovative approach that Los Angeles Metro chose to sort of launch this program with the PDA and the P3. The affordability that I talk about is not only for the CapEx, the capital expenditure, but also for the 30-year O&M that would be part of that concession for the contractor that gets selected. So in terms of the construction time, why do I say, and we can back up the claims that we have for this, for the entire alignment, in terms of the line, we can build this in record time. Again, this is not based on all the past projects in LA. This will be super fast. Again, we've given the schedules to Metro. They'll daylight the information and the details. But because of its modularity and the fact that we use prefabricated guideway beams, column caps, this can be constructed per crew. Again, imagine that 15-mile that Gerard talked about, with theoretically using 15 crews, each one being responsible for a mile. We build this, in a very rapid progression. Easily, the production rates that you get for these kind of modern monorail structures is somewhere between 600 to 1,000 feet per day or per night, depending on when you are able to lift these into place. So in terms of the timeline of building the alignment, it'll be super quick. Gerard mentioned potentially phase 2 to LAX. This would be completely linear in that sense, that in terms of the cost of it, you can, based on today's assumptions and the dollars that we've used, this would be linear. That's, let's say the first phase up to Expo is about 15, 16 miles. There's another 7 to 8 miles to reach LAX, so that would be proportionate to that. But in terms of the construction time, it can be constructed. Again, this is a theoretical, hypothetical case. If Metro gave the order to build it all the way to LAX, we could construct it in the same exact schedule that it would take us to construct the first phase. I hope this is clear. This is one of the compelling reasons that we have chosen to define the projects and the alignments the way we have, and primarily is to remove any excuses for the decision makers not to build this line. So hopefully this line will get built. Hopefully it'll be our alignments. nonetheless, this corridor deserves a public transit network. Next slide, please. Just some more views representative of this. There are lots of projects that I forgot to mention earlier in other parts of the world that are in operation, and they are doing typically somewhere between 24,000 passengers per hour per direction, or the ones, the newer ones that are implemented reach up to around 50,000 passengers per hour per direction. Yellow and pink line in Bangkok, the two lines in Cairo, 48,000, 45,000 passengers per hour per direction. So capacity is really not the issue. The way the vehicles are configured, because they're internally open, if you do a 4-car or 6-car or 8-car consist, you can walk from one end to the other. So the passengers can level load the train as they wish, or if they just wish to see a different view from a different location, they can move about the trains. It's not limited to the married pairs that you have in LA today. So it's green, sustainable, it's constructible, it's affordable. Those are typically what drive most of the engineering decisions that we make. Next slide. I believe we're done. Any questions at this point, Denny? Our team is at your disposal.
Yeah, listen, thank you very, very much. One of the questions that comes up, I think, routinely in discussion here is how this system and the subway system address connection to UCLA. So my understanding of what you described here and what I heard from our prior presentation, that in both cases, it's envisioned that there would be an underground station on UCLA campus at or near the Luskin Center.
Yes, sir.
What is the most significant difference between your proposal and the other proposal, the subway proposal, with respect to that connection to UCLA?
Gerard, if you want to field this.
Yeah, so I just want to be careful. Like I said, I will just stick to our alternatives. But what we done is, like I said, we still have all 6 alternatives have a single seat ride to UCLA, as we have as well in our alternative 3. Again, we looked at a range of alternatives. So we wanted to make sure that we address in the environmental document and give people the option to evaluate a base condition and then also the direct connection to UCLA. But all, I think, connect very similarly. The fundamental difference, I think, if I can say, is we have a shorter tunnel segment. We tried to, as Michael mentioned, some of the restraints or conditions with digging a tunnel that, longer. So we've tried to minimize the length of our tunnel as much as possible, but still serve that 1-seat ride to UCLA.
Okay, so one of the other, I think a subway system can be a very fast system. It's a straight line, even if it's underground, it's a straight line. It can travel very quickly. How does the travel time compare, do you think, between what you're proposing and what the subway might envision?
Metro has actually shared the travel times for the 6 alternatives, so I will leave that to that. It's on the Metro website. As we mentioned, in any public transit, any time that you're negotiating a turn or a curve, the train and the vehicle must slow down for safety reasons. The benefit of the monorail, for it to be incorporated or inserted into densely developed fabric environment of a city like LA, to still keep it above ground, because at grade, none of the technologies would make sense. We already see it disturbs the car traffic and it disturbs the safety and the flow of the public transit and the rail vehicles. So when you come to grade separation, if you build above ground, it's a fraction of a cost versus a tunnel. And I'm talking about our options. And we have the figures, so this is very specific to the distinction between elevated versus tunnel. So that's why we choose to take the trade-offs in order to make it constructible quickly and affordable. We give up a little bit on the travel time. Our vehicles are capable of traveling at 75 miles an hour. So that's a comparable speed to heavy HRTs that they call it here, heavy rail option. But that's not the end of the story. The project has to be like anything else, affordable, constructible, least minimally disturbing the city in terms of the existing usage and businesses and commutes, etc. So we have deliberately chosen that, and we believe we've made the right trade-offs for a slightly longer journey time to capitalize on all those benefits. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I hadn't heard yet that the suggestion that phase 2 defined from Expo to LAX could be built at the same time as phase 1. Is that what you said?
I said theoretically, because the decision is not mine or our team. If Metro or Los Angeles chose to build straight from Van Nuys all the way to LAX, the construction time will not change for us. We will incorporate that to the same exact kind of time frame that we're doing for phase 1, and the cost would be linear per mile. You can do, when you see the cost figures that Metro ultimately shares, you can take that and extrapolate it per mile to reach UCLA, more or less. Again, this is just a figure of speech right now. Or, but the important point is that you build it basically on whatever that original schedule is for it to reach Expo.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat. Is it okay if I
Go for it.
bubble those up? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about kind of construction, and then we can talk a little bit about operations. Daryl Clark, who's on our board. Hi, Daryl. Asked, does the monorail guideway cross bridges above the 405, like Burbank, Skirball Center Drive, Palms Boulevard? How would that work? And then sort of related question for Robert about elevated rail and earthquake safety.
Just so you don't get tired of hearing only from me, I'll let Gerard handle the bridge question, and I'll be happy to talk about the operation.
Yeah, no, certainly. Thank you, Michael. As you can see in my background here in some of the images we showed, the technology of the monorail is highly flexible in the span lengths. So from generally on an average, we have about 80, the columns every 80 to 100 feet, let's say, depending on, and there's a benefit cost to doing that. For some of the structures, the only structure that we go under is the Mulholland Bridge, and that was in one of the graphics that was shown. Otherwise, we're elevated, above the freeway, either in the median or the side. And for those structures that we would just clear span them. So we have ability to put special structures in that we could span 150 feet or more to be able to clear those. So even as, let's say, there's utilities are in the way or some other element at grade that we want to avoid, the technology allows that we vary the span lengths to be able to accommodate and avoid those impacts. So like most of the bridges or all the bridges, we're literally clear spanning them. We're not impacting the existing bridges as we develop the monorail. Did I answer your question? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and then earthquakes?
Earthquakes, they're going to be designed to every seismic standard with Metro, their Metro Rail design criteria, the Caltrans seismic design criteria, the building codes. So all those elements, it will be designed identical and meet or exceed all the seismic design criteria in Southern California.
And let me, the 10 freeway shut down because of a column issue. Is there a concern there about columns and exposure to?
If you live in LA, you've probably heard at least in passing about the Sepulveda line.
Oh,
That's the potential to be one of the most transformative transit.
Who's playing a video?
Sorry, I clicked on the link that was provided and it's
okay.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Just sorry, I didn't hear the full question. If you don't mind asking.
Oh yeah, the 10 freeway was shut down because of like a column issue. Or is there a concern about vulnerability of columns?
No, I mean it's like any other system. I mean it's something, and these are inspected, and some of the advantages of the monorail being above ground is that they're visually there for us to inspect, and there is different operational requirements that we will implement that all these columns and beams can be visually and other methods be inspected, based on certain frequency and so forth. So if there's an issue, we're going to see it. It's above ground, it's not buried, and there's protocols for that. Like all structures, there's an inspection, annual inspections, or even more frequent inspections that Caltrans does as all their bridges. Right. So it's no different than any other structure in LA.
And alternative 3 includes a tunnel, correct?
Yes.
I go to that transit center right on campus all the time, so I know that area well. But y'all aren't experts on tunneling, or are you?
We have international, we have. Like I said, we have international firms, and Skanska was our contractor, is on board. They do a lot of work. In fact, believe they're working on the Purple Line for Metro right now. They're one of the contractors on one of the segments. So we have extensive experience on the team designing tunnels and constructing tunnels as well.
Got it. Okay. So,
Eli, if I may just add on that tunneling, I have tremendous respect for the other alternatives and how they're going to be constructed. I don't believe the earthquake and seismic activities is going to be a concern for any of the alternatives because of, again, the codes and standards and practices that are being built. It really has boiled down to how people react to being underground versus above ground when there's a seismic activity. Right. It's more of a sort of a preference rather than a science kind of thing.
And is it initially 8 cars or 6 car trains for the platforms?
We are designed for the stations today to accommodate up to 8 cars. So the station platform is long enough to accommodate an 8-car train, and then we have some overhang from there. And we will scale the project to what the ridership that Metro is telling us that they need. So we will probably scale it back, but that discussion, to my satisfaction, hasn't happened yet because the numbers for the ridership, and again, this is just my professional opinion, this is to be vetted further in the next phase of the project, post LPA.
But I think ridership, when you talk about ridership, frequency matters, right? When you talk to any rider, the frequency of the service and the ability, okay, I just missed my bus or my train. Oh, but there's another one coming in, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Can you talk again about the maximum frequency that you might be able to hit? And of course, that's pending operation issues with Metro, because we know that they don't always run the most service that they can possibly do, much to our chagrin, I might add. But yeah.
So the minimum headway or the maximum frequency that we envisage right now is 2 minutes. That we would be during peak hours, peak operational hours, we'd be operating at 2-minute headway.
Now, but this plan is to be automated, correct? An automated system, and so is the other. Metro has a third option that they've developed with live operators. Is there an advantage to the way that you're planning to operate? Could you have live operators? And then related is this sort of safety and security issue. There's real concern about the end of line. Metro has had some issues with customer experience, let's say. What are you doing in terms of design that's going to address some of these real challenges related to customer experience, cleanliness, that type of thing?
I appreciate the question, and I hope I can cover all the stuff that I have in mind. Number one, the automated system guarantee punctuality, so with full safety. So you cannot cram more trains or into the alignment without potentially compromising the safety. And that brings in the stopping distance of the train and all those kind of things. So punctuality of the service is the main reason we use automated signaling, basically, the GA04 that I mentioned. In terms of the cleanliness and security and safety, this program will have a 30-year concession. So that will be operated by us. I mentioned our operator, Keolis. They operate around 400, in excess of 400 driverless systems around the globe. So they will be bringing a very different perspective. And in terms of the cleanliness and all that, we have already proposed our operation and maintenance plans to Metro. And obviously the KPIs that Metro attaches to this will inform exactly, how and, that those are going to be met. But there are significant penalties if you miss those operational KPIs. So we've given it a lot of attention, both from a technology and design perspective, as well as from an O&M procedural considerations.
I'd like to ask a question that you raised earlier, Michael. You described the distinction between this system and the competing system, the distinctions being between project affordability and construction time, but you also mentioned journey experience. But you haven't really talked much about the journey experience and what differences you see. Might you get into that?
Sure. To be clear, I was comparing the tunnel element of our project to the elevated portion of our project. I steer clear, not just because of PDA, but for just professional reasons. I'm not here to talk about the other PDA teams or what they are. We are all sort of working and collaborating with Metro to give them a range of options. So I have only utmost respect for the other two teams or the other three alternatives. In terms of the journey experience, I'm talking about most places. I've built projects and my teams have built projects overseas for the last 20 years. And I've picked up a couple of things in those experiences where, for example, when they design their public transit, one of the key elements of the considerations of the projects are what does it do to that city in terms of its stature, in terms of its image. I have tremendous respect for many of the projects that I did, for example, in Dubai, and that it surpasses almost any other standard that I've seen anywhere else. Because of that, I have immense admiration for what they've accomplished in such a short time. So here in Los Angeles, we've got an amazing city, and we basically don't get to see it. So when we're driving, we only get the negative part of it, because when I'm driving in 405 and I'm cooped up in my car for a journey that should take 10 minutes, but it takes an hour and a half, it is a terrible experience. So if I'm floating and I visualize, and I did this for a reason, I visualize that I'm floating above 405. I'm seeing all the wonderful views along my path, and I look down at the cars that are stuck there. So that is going to advertise this new public transit system for all the people that hesitate to take public transit, being car culture and all that stuff. Car culture was fantastic, back in the 50s when you could drive your car properly at the proper speed and get the wind in your hair and all that good stuff. I no longer have hair, and I no longer can travel at 70 miles an hour on the highway. So all that car culture benefit, in my humble opinion, has fizzled out already. And we are still carrying with that sentimental attachment to our cars. We are designing this line to work and to be prominently servicing this area for the next 100 years. Transit and travel will be changing, my friends. I'm preaching to the choir here. People are not going to even own cars in a few decades from today. We've got autonomous vehicles. The cars are going to be as a service, mobility as a service. So it's going to be a very different world. So the community feeling that we're trying to, and the sense of community we're trying to create around our stations, are really geared to cater to the future, not to the past.
Got it. I got a question. There's a really good question here, and I want to big up Jorge's comment about connecting Santa Clarita Valley. I love that. I don't know if that's possible right now. It's not in the 40-year transportation plan, but by gosh, Measure R, Measure M, Denny, as you like to say, is a forever tax. And so after we've completed all the projects in the 40-year transportation plan, man, we should extend stuff. But we got this question from Rohan, and I think it's a valid question. You talked about dropping alternative 2 for consideration. Have you also considered eliminating alternative 1, which has longer travel times and lower ridership numbers than Alt 2 and no direct connection to UCLA?
We are committed to alternative 1 and 3. I don't believe, as I mentioned, that I'm convinced yet on the ridership numbers for any of this, because the model that's used is heavily favoring travel time. In my humble opinion, it's not the end game. Travel time matters, but it's very much skewing the ridership discussions. And in any such project, when the project is committed to be built, you would reconfigure and optimize your bus routes and all the feeder routes to bring the passengers and the demand to the locations. So
I gotta follow up on that. I don't know if you can still bring up the presentation. It wasn't clear. Is that going to be like a dedicated bus lane? And then, I look at that too, and I know that corner really well. I mean, there's federal property. There's there's the VA, obviously. There's the federal building. There is the what's it called? The cemetery. I feel like that's a real challenge, right? I mean, is the federal government where are they on having a station right next to their building?
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at it, and I really want Gerard to talk about this. Quite frankly, I've said this before, I'll repeat it here. It broke my heart when we had to drop alternative 2, because the team pulled all the stops and really looked at very creatively how we could make that work. They made it work, but based on the criteria that we applied to it, we still don't have a clear way of applying a process that Metro is going to apply to select the LPA. We used our own judgment, and it scored less in terms of the impacts and all the risks and all those kind of things. So it scored less than our alternative 1 and 2. Both of them are very much viable, affordable, constructible. But in terms of the cemetery and the National Cemetery, etc., there are precedences that we've cited for Metro, National, the Washington, D.C. National Cemetery. It's got a metro station, etc., etc. I'll hand it off at this point to Gerard.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So with alternative 1 and 3, we're avoiding the cemetery. So we're going to be in close proximity along Veteran Avenue, but we're not encroaching onto the VA, the cemetery property. As far as the VA itself, we've had several, multiple coordination meetings with them and provided them opportunities to look at our design. So Metro, through Metro, we're working with the VA. In fact, we've tried to minimize as much impacts to the VA property as possible. So even when we go down the 4 or 5 alignment, we're literally just skirting the Caltrans freeway there, at the property line between the two, to be able to minimize the impacts of the VA property as much as possible. So that's been one of our primary drivers. We've also had coordination with the GSA as well about having the ability to go around the property itself. There's a park right between there. We're kind of skirting right through there. So we've had those coordinations. Those are going to be ongoing discussions. They'll be vetted through the environmental process as well. And, Metro as the lead agency, we'll be working with those federal agencies as well to be able to facilitate the alternatives. But with dropping of alternative 2, one of the other benefits is we had originally looked at a station on Veteran Avenue, south of Wilshire, right next to it's not next to the GSA building, but with the dropping of alternative 2, that's no longer an issue. And plus, given the density, there were some other cultural elements within the Westwood neighborhood. I believe there's a historic district and things like that. So with dropping of alternative 2, that the added benefit there is we avoid those historic elements and some of the other culture. I think there's like a historic fire station and things like that we try to avoid.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you. This question came up with the other alternatives as well. Is and we've been huge proponents of Move LA of how do we build more affordable housing near public transportation. We're the major proponents for Measure ULA, the mansion tax, and have been pushing more affordable housing near public transit. What are the options or the opportunities, I guess, near or at these station areas for more affordable housing? Is it limited because it's above ground already? What are options? Because we need, like, frankly, like, especially for UCLA, I mean, Westwood is absolutely unaffordable for, well, for pretty much anyone. We need more affordable options near these train stations.
Yeah, Michael, I know.
Start
ahead.
and I'll add to it.
Yeah, let me just start off. Just the elevation of the monorail is not a bearing on that. So the way we've structured the alignment is that we're trying to minimize impacts to the local communities adjacent to the freeway. So in many cases, we're in the state right away. We're in the Caltrans right away. In fact, our Wilshire station is located in a loop ramp of Caltrans, so we don't impact those local facilities. So like the stations like Santa Monica, it's already in a highly urbanized area, commercial area. So those affordable housing has to do with available land, right? It has to be parcels of land or other elements available next to the station. So some stations are obviously very constrained, but others have an opportunity, like in the expo area, there's potentially remnants or other parcels that, can be utilized for that maybe potential, transit-oriented development and things like that. So Michael,
well, I guess that begs the other question, and we're huge advocates of active transportation as well, right? We just worked to pass Measure HLA. How would you get, so housing couldn't be on the site in some cases, but in some cases it could. How do you propose getting, pedestrian, walkability, scootability, strollers, wheelchairs? How do people get to the actual stations?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, these are going to be accessed as far as like kiss and ride, ride sharing, any bike paths. So Metro, beyond this project, it has a first last mile plan, and we've put together our recommendations as well of how, once you get to the stations, how they connect to these other bike or ped or other elements, strollers, sidewalks. So we're integrating into the sidewalks, all the full ADA compliance. But beyond that, once the project matures, there's this first last mile plan that is being developed for the project that looks at all those considerations as well. And how, as Michael said, do we veer bus routes to make it more accessible to the station? Is there bike paths or other local street improvements that can be built to be able to provide that additional access and easier access to the station? So all that's being developed as part of the environmental process.
I'll jump in here to both of your questions, Eli, in rapid succession. In terms of differently abled passengers being able to use the network, that is one of the prominent considerations. And as Gerard said, ADA and other guidelines have been used to enable it and go beyond it, number one. In terms of the affordable housing, we have, again, these are not part of our scope for this project, but we have ideas and recommendations that we've discussed in our design teams for transit-oriented developments, TODs, and there are opportunities to do that. And that goes to the heart of what I was talking about earlier in terms of the station catchment and the passenger and ridership and all those kinds of things. That's one small element of that. In terms of the alternative two, the difficulty we had with that is that we pulled all the stops, even considered going under the National Cemetery in order to facilitate a more straight path to reach UCLA, again, in hopes of getting those 25 design options to get UCLA to bless one of them for us to continue to keep it. But when they didn't, again, it didn't make sense anymore. In terms of the overall station context area, for all the features that Gerard mentioned, there is huge benefits with the way we've designed the stations. And again, it's up to Metro to implement it at some point to really improve that catchment and that ride experience, so people can get there, even the charging stations and things of that nature. So without going into too much detail that we can't daylight right now, there is a lot of opportunity for innovation and really creativity that have not been in any of our transit systems in the US, let alone in California.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off. I realize that we have gone over our time, and that was my fault. I wasn't looking at the clock. Just a lot of questions, wanted to make sure to get them answered. But I really appreciate your time for providing this educational information. We really appreciate it, and answering all the questions.